On August 1st, 2016, a mysterious live video appeared on Frank Ocean's website, boysdon'tcry.co, and continued off and on for 12 days. The live stream focused on Frank in a storage locker, building what we would soon find out to be a staircase off and on for 12 days. Occasionally, the silence and ambient stair-building noises were broken with music. On August 13th, the live stream mysteriously disappeared. After 7 more days of silence, the stream would continue before midnight struck on August 19th. As Frank finished up the building of the structure, he would ascend the staircase until the video cut to black. Then at midnight, the short film titled Endless, a 46-minute cut of the over 120 hours of live video and the collection of music heard throughout, was released. Not entirely an album, but not entirely a short film, Endless would remain this enigma, exclusive to Apple Music and accompanied always by the short film, until it was finally reissued in CD quality on vinyl, DVD, CD, and VHS in 2018. However, that was the last we heard from Endless, and the music itself wouldn't officially release on streaming still, leaving it to be relatively forgotten by the general public. Despite Frank Ocean being one of the most celebrated musicians in the world, this album still had a mystery to it. The story of Endless is fascinating, but it has almost eclipsed the album itself. We hear more about the mystery of the live stream or the infamous deal with Def Jam than the content on this record. Perhaps this was fault of the esoteric marketing, the exclusivity to Apple Music, or the perception of this record as a set of throwaways that merely preceded the monumental Blonde. But I personally believe that Endless deserves more than just a passing mention in the Wikipedia article of Blonde, and I think its themes and sounds are just as powerful as any of Frank's works. With this deep dive, I wanted to take a close look at Endless, its meaning, and look closer at the tracks of this underrated album by one of music's greatest artists. This is Endless. Even when you're looking at the track list of Endless, it's understandable why this is such an enigmatic album. Everywhere you look, you find a bit of discrepancy in the individual songs, weird 11-second tracks that blend in with others, even a disagreement on the true album's cover. But the way I will be interpreting the album follows the official release of the vinyl, which negates the beginning and ending tracks entitled Device Control, and begins with At Your Best You Are Love, and ends with Mitsubishi Sony, which is sometimes called Mitsu Sony. The 2 device control tracks that are removed from the audio-exclusive formats appear on the VHS and DVD release of the album. These tracks are a sample from the artist Wolfgang Tillmans, featuring robotic and distant samples of discussion of Apple phones, which was chosen to bookend the short film for its appearance on Apple Music. As Wolfgang says himself in an interview with Pitchfork, his original vision for the track was to showcase, quote, "The absurdity of living life through constantly depicting and broadcasting it is so funny when looked at in the serious words of phone manufacturers, as if any of it matters, and at the same time we're all doing it to varying degrees," unquote. I think this ties well into the themes of Endless that we will get into later. Finally, the official release of the album showcases this white cover with the empty storage locker in the middle, with different releases having different decals on the bottom. The vinyl release has these translucent stickers, the CD with tape at the bottom, and the VHS is blank, featuring another image at the bottom. Confusingly, however, the official artwork, released in 2017, features the opposite color scheme and no decals. Personally, my favorite is the vinyl release. The translucent stickers signifying the re-release kind of play into the sound of the album in a weird way. I also think the white color scheme works a lot better with this album, feeling a lot more hollow, an energy in which the sounds of this album showcase very well. The white has a sense of futurism and coincides with Blonde's cover much better. The album kind of carries the same energy as a leaked album, despite many official releases. The album's lack of accessibility has both negatives and positives. It makes it a little more difficult to discuss and find information on, a lot less shareable, but it does benefit from its exclusivity by feeding into its almost otherworldly aura. To some, it may feel like a hodgepodge of undercooked tracks and throwaways, but the more you look into it, the more you understand its themes and appreciate it as the complete project that it is. Again, the biggest hurdle to cross is the inaccessibility of it. Once you do cross that hurdle though, you'll be met with some of Frank's most experimental yet beautiful tracks thus far. Saying that though makes it seem like Endless is completely divorced from the rest of Frank's discography. It certainly has the most in common with Blonde. Later I'll describe these two as companion pieces. How is this though? Both thematically and sonically, Endless has ties to Blonde. Thematically, Endless explores similar themes of growing up, unrequited love, and loneliness that Blonde does, but does so with different perspectives and priorities, which again I'll get into later. Sonically, the tracks Futura Free and specifically the Coachella version of White Ferrari are the most similar to me, which if you haven't heard the latter yet, please go find a recording of it, you'll see exactly what I mean. Endless does work well both in Frank's larger discography, but also as something different entirely, and that's partly due to the video element, which I want to take a look at now. The video/film/live stream ties into a common theme of the album of the passage of time and waiting. Waiting in terms of waiting for time to pass, but also in a more meta sense of waiting for Frank to release the album. This may seem like a joke considering the massive amount of time we've been waiting for his next release, but back in the sweet, naive times of 2016, 4 years was a long time for us to wait for new Frank Ocean music. In fact, he touches on this theme a lot, specifically in the video. The visual metaphor of building the staircase on a live stream is seemingly to evoke the seemingly endless cycle of the creation of art, and the live stream element showcases how many peering eyes are watching him. Frank talks a lot about his artistic process on the album with lyrics like these from Unity, referencing his often mysterious and absent persona as a result of him focusing on his opus, or these lines from Slide On Me, referring to how his absence from 2012's Channel Orange was purposeful, and fans should not expect him to retire just because he's gone. I do certainly hope that this is the case, as we're now approaching 8 years from Blonde. But either way, these words also coincide with the themes of isolation that the video portrays. A blank, monochrome warehouse with nothing but Frank's project, a staircase that leads to nowhere. My read is that this is a representation of the futility he feels while making his art, like it's for nothing, like it's an endless cycle for no reason. However, maybe the feelings of isolation and futility also come from the amount of prying eyes on the artistic process, specifically in the internet age. I think it's an interesting perspective to look at. However, a more optimistic outlook on this same theme of artistic transparency comes from a Pitchfork interview from Tom Sachs, an artistic associate on Endless. Quote, "And also that is one of the foundations of hip-hop and soul music, the transparency, versus classical music where the orchestra of many people work together to create one sound. There has always been an attempt to make something where you can understand without thinking, to feel. There's always been this transparency in hip-hop for a lot of reasons. Even if you go back to the vinyl record, you can hear the flaws and skips and errors, and those are the kinds of foundation of the sample. This refers a lot to the sound of the album that we'll get into later, the glitchy, robotic, artistic samples that litter the entire project. Sachs refers to the openness of the art form by contrasting it to orchestral sounds, saying that in orchestra, many people work together to create one sound, while in hip-hop, often it is one artist using a variety of sounds to create one song. This quote is a reflection on how almost collage-like modern music can be, a mix of sounds, samples, voices, all layered together to create something completely new. The metaphor of live streaming the building of a staircase, a piece of art, heavily evokes this theme of transparency. The aesthetics of the video are also something to take a look at. The loneliness and isolation of a storage locker in which he is doing nothing but building creates a unique atmosphere that coincides with the sounds of the album perfectly. You know, when you're driving at night listening to Blonde, it's that same feeling. Overall, I believe the video itself can have many different interpretations. When we take a closer look at the themes and the sounds of the album, many of these will tie back to the aesthetics and direction of the video, reinforcing many of the things that Frank is trying to say here. The main themes of Endless are actually a bit messy and all over the place. but I do think it's purposeful. Honestly, the messiness of Endless is part of the theme. The way I see it, Endless, while touching on some similar topics of Blonde, such as the passage of time, isolation, maturation, love, and loss of love, focuses much more on how these topics can combine to create a completely different feeling of loss. These feelings also coincide with the themes of isolation as relating to the digital age, which I think is a major theme of this record. This is what I'm going to be focusing on mainly. It's important to remember that this was released as a live stream, taking place over weeks, and the best way to listen to it is still unclear. Technology is inherently part of this album's identity. Like we touched on with the quote from Wolfgang Tillmans, life is absurd, and especially now in the internet age, there are so many different things both vying for your attention, but also isolating you. Identity in the digital age is definitely something hard to come by. Who really are you versus how you convey yourself online? This isn't just for public figures, this is for everyone. How you curate your Instagram page or your Snapchat story is exactly that, curated. It's not exactly you, it is your persona. And how does this interact with love? How can you love another when you can't even figure out yourself? As Frank says on Higgs, I watch video, only difference is flattened and remiss, sparks of lightning storm behind wet faces, slip my pants back on and rewind it once more. The tape stopped before I was back alone. This song, Higgs, is referencing the Higgs boson particle, an allusion to quantum physics and how things can be in two states at once. In this case, his relationship. And not just his relationship, but him. Watching a video on a flat screen, reminiscing on a lost relationship, being able to continually rewind the video and relive that memory, while a blessing in this day and age, is damaging to one's mental health. The tape stopping, just reigniting the feeling of being alone, is exactly why. I'm sure many of us have gone back to our camera roll to look at a relationship we no longer have, having nothing but good memories, and feeling sad and possibly alone in its absence. Or is that just me? That exact feeling is what Frank is dealing with a lot on this album. Relationships future and past having undertones of disconnection and loneliness. Maybe it drives you to atone for who you used to be, or currently are, as Frank says in Unity. Where's the shaman ayahuasca I had WhatsApped him for atonement? Using the internet as validation or as a way to look for self-improvement can be equally as damaging. It not only leads to insecurity, but comparison to others, and paradoxically makes one feel more isolated. Young people like Frank, who grew up surrounded by technology, can experience these intense feelings of loneliness in an age where we feel so connected. This has led to a wide variety of different things, and honestly, it's even more harrowing looking back on it from the COVID pandemic. This isolation leads to situations like in Higgs, where one is in a state of two places at once. Or perhaps look at the 30-second Mine, in which it states, quote, "How come the ecstasy always depresses me so? Chemically, I don't have any more places to go." Whether this quote is referencing looking for validation online or validation in a relationship, this is a great way to look at the theme of duality on this album. Constantly being connected to the entire world, yet feeling disconnected to it from the same time. Feeling love with someone, yet feeling disconnected from them. Feeling in love with what used to be them, yet physically being disconnected. All of these are examples of the duality that Frank is feeling. As I mentioned earlier, love is another big theme on this album, mainly looking at unrequited love and past lovers. An article by Will Olszewicz from NYU's Applied Psychology Opus explains these themes better than I ever could, but to take an excerpt from that I think sums up this theme very well and relates it back to what I was saying. Quote, "Ocean describes what many in early adulthood are searching for, the ability to find a person with whom they can raise children and make a life beyond their own. Research has shown that people in the early adulthood stage often hold their relationships to high standards, going as far as to judge them based on their ability to form a lifelong marriage. People in this stage have been shown to desire partners that care as much about their relationship as they do." Ocean integrates this idea in his song Slide On Me, which is emblematic of the modern obsession for the perfect relationship. In this track, Ocean sings, quote, "I'm working while you dream pop. This is for when you change your mind and slide back this way. This is for that night when setbacks won't let much fade. Guess you can't blame the ones you chose." End quote. The modern obsession for the perfect relationship is another topic I think is often pointed to as being emblematic of a larger problem of isolation in the digital age. Constantly comparing yourself to others, your relationship to others, to a point where you lose sight of what's important to you. There's no such thing as the perfect relationship, no matter what the internet wants you to think, and Frank is struggling with this idea throughout all of Endless. In Wither, a song whose title again highlights the duality of this album, standing for with her or wither, Frank starts out the track by saying, quote, "Over where the trees burn down, the place where the fields went down in flames, we put a hole in the ground, throw seeds, and dance for rain." Using this imagery of a burning field of trees, Frank is discussing the need to cut off a relationship. However, he remains hesitant. Maybe we could start this up again, throw seeds in the ground, and dance for rain. Holding on to this hope for a perfect relationship, he wants to rebuild and start anew, even though he's pretty much gotten rid of the relationship. The holding on to this relationship again puts him in a state of duality, even as the video describes an endless cycle, constantly building up a staircase to nowhere. There are many other themes of this album, but I really wanted to use that main idea of duality to express my points. Many of the themes of love tie back into things said on Blonde, so I wanted to mainly focus on the biggest ideas I found most exclusive to Endless. Overall, though, Endless is a story of trying to find meaningful connection in the digital age, and how this can create divides in identity and even priorities. Okay, let's talk about the actual music. Well, all this analysis wasn't for nothing, as the album itself is actually one of Frank's most intriguing. It's hard to tell exactly when Endless was worked on, especially relative to Blonde. Blonde is known to have been worked on since 2013, and it's widely accepted that Endless was created after Blonde, but even that is hard to tell. The biggest evidence comes from an interview with the narrator of Facebook story on Blonde, who heavily implies that Blonde was created, then they returned together to work on Endless. My personal theory is that it's most likely the Blonde sessions birthed Endless, as there are a lot of similar sounds and even samples between the two. Perhaps the more electronic-focused sounds on Blonde sparked the ideas and concept of Endless, which then moved forward to become something else entirely. Sort of a Kid A to Amnesiac sort of dynamic. This album features a wide variety of musicians. Alex G does most of the guitar work, as he did with Blonde. James Blake is credited on working the synthesizers on At Your Best You Are Love, and Johnny Greenwood of Radiohead is credited with the string orchestration on the same song. Frank himself was the executive producer, but other production was done by 88 Keys, Troy Noka, and even Arca. Finally, the mastering was done by the acclaimed Mike Dean. This large list of contributors leads the album to have a very clean yet diverse soundscape. Frank uses a mix of acoustic guitar work and dream pop sounds that create a very futuristic and unique sounding album. There are tracks on this album of strictly ambient noise, using either samples like on Ambience 2, Honey Baby, or the instrumental track Rushes 2 that showcases a psychedelic, electronic, almost house-inspired beat. Many have compared these tracks to something like Aphex Twin, which I find especially interesting because they both tackle similar themes of confusion in the digital age. Frank's voice is always a highlight on anything he touches, and this is no exception. A song like Rushes is the most stripped-back instrumental on the album, but features Frank's longing and dreamy vocals crooning out "Wake Me Up in a Week." Another track like Florida mixes both the ambient elements and Frank's voice to create a hollow yet heavenly track that honestly might even be one of the best on the album. Frank is definitely acting more experimentally on this album, creating these interesting mixes of ambient, house, hip-hop, and synthwave everywhere. Impietas plus Death Wish, which the former word refers to impiety, is an example of this mix of sounds, creating a soundscape more akin to Bon Iver or again Aphex Twin, layering James Blake's vocals under his own. Some of these more experimental songs feel more hollow than others, like on Mine, produced by Arca, where Frank's speaking is essentially all we get. But looking at these in the context of a visual album, it makes a bit more sense. Interludes sprinkled all around the dozens of hours of footage, acting as bridges between the more complete sounding songs. Mine acts as an interlude between Sampha's vocals in Alabama and one of the highlights in Unity. And there are other songs that the experimental vocal deliveries don't really make the impact they were going for. The beginning vocals on Xenons, for example, while interesting, are a bit too abrasive for me. However, the good thing is that the short tracks really make the moments where things get a little too dreamy short enough to where they don't overstay their welcome. In fact, I'd criticize that I kind of want to hear more of some of these tracks, like Comme des Garçons. I wish a track like this had more time to grow. Some of the more standout tracks on this album are the ones that have these longer runtimes and a larger thematic focus. Unity's slow, pulsating beat lets Frank rap about a number of topics: love, technology, growing up. Unity is actually styled UNITY, suggesting you and I, as it both discusses maturing and growing up. Rushes has a similar strategy, letting the vocals flow over both beats in this chilling song. Higgs does the exact same thing, stripping back and going almost into a full ballad. These latter two songs also act as the most thematically dense tracks on the whole project, further accenting the feeling of emotional climax that the balladry makes you feel. Rushes is my personal favorite track on this record, and is up there for one of my favorite Frank tracks ever. A beautiful mix of every sound that I described so far: futurism, balladry, romance, hopelessness, nostalgia. Truly a beautiful song. It may seem jarring that so many of these tracks go from stripped-back ballads to spacey electronic beats, but this record is an extremely cohesive 40 minutes. Everything from the distant samples to the acoustic guitar flow together to create an atmosphere and, again, futuristic sound palette. In there somewhere's distant and high-pitched vocals flow beautifully into the less experimental and more grounded Slide On Me, so grounded that it later got a Young Thug remix. The way these tracks flow so perfectly together, mixed with the atmosphere that it creates, truly accents every word that Frank sings on this record. The feelings of nostalgia, anxiety, loneliness are all explored in 3 different mediums: the music, the poetry, and the visuals. Endless doesn't only sound amazing, but it looks, feels, and discusses everything just as amazingly. Finally, to tie up some loose ends on tracks I didn't discuss, Sideways highlights the cohesion even better, flowing perfectly from Slide On Me. The flow on this track is uniquely bland, almost Earl Sweatshirt-esque. Hublows highlights the feelings of loneliness throughout the album, even with its short runtime. At Your Best You Are Love is a cover of Aaliyah's song with the same title, which itself is a cover of the Isley Brothers' original version of the song. This fact kind of helps with the themes of this being a musical collage of different sounds, opening the album with his own version of this song. Each version of the song has a completely different context, Frank's feeling more longing and distant. And finally, Mitsu Soni's robotic beat and sample act as an excellent outro, tying the themes together and sending the album off on a more upbeat note musically, yet it does feel uncanny valley in a way in the context of the entire album. Overall, the album musically has an otherworldly atmosphere that perfectly ties into its themes and the story that it's trying to tell, all while sounding great. It's not an album, aside from maybe Slide On Me, that belongs at a party, unless you feel like crying there, but artistically it achieves something that nothing else in Frank's discography does. Overall, I believe Frank Ocean's Endless to be one of the most overlooked projects in any mainstream artist's discography. With futuristic and dreamy sounds mixing with more stripped back and hollow sounds, the album creates a palette unlike any other. The themes explored on this album reflect these sounds and create a portrait of isolation, confusion, and the fear of the passage of time in an age where it seems like it's only getting faster. Endless achieves a lot while still feeling overshadowed by Blonde. While they share similar themes, it's best to look at them as companion pieces and not 2 different steps in Frank's artistic growth. Endless tells an extremely important story of how to love in the internet age, something that anyone below the age of 30 can relate to today, and it just so happens to create beautiful visuals and sounds while doing it. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you all enjoyed the video. Put a lot of effort into the actual research of this one. Same with the upcoming SZA video. So if you like this is the content that I really want to make the most, not just like out of fun like the ranking videos. Those ones are just kind of for fun for me, but these are really the videos that I take most pride into, so I hope you enjoy. Yeah, really that's all I gotta say though. Thanks for watching.